impossible if we don't understand the dynamics of how by go do a quick study and leave. You want to. We have published quite a number of papers in two models, I would say.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Prof. I would prefer you introduce yourself to us.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. Hello, everyone. My name is Francesco Rovero. I'm an associate professor of ecology here at the University of Florence. I'm in the Department of Biology. I'm an ecologist. I've been here in this university since 2019, so I'm actually relatively new here. But before, I've been working for a science museum for the previous 10 to 15 years in different positions, and I have a strong focus on tropical biodiversity, which is relevant to the Tropimundo master that you are taking.
Great. Most times when we say Tropimundo, a lot of people do get confused.
Yeah, so Tropimundo is actually an European master, Erasmus Mundi, and for us it's a curriculum within the master school in natural science. So it's embedded into the teaching of the university.
The last question on Tropimundo, in case someone wants to,
Yeah.
a student who wants to be part of the program, what do they do?
So Tropimundo is funded by the European Union, and there is rounds of applications every year. So students can apply to scholarship for Tropimundo, whereby they will spend semesters in different parts in Europe and in the tropics. So in this semester we have a round of students. There's more than 30 of them that were funded to follow this master.
Great. I guess that would be a good opportunity for people who may want to apply. Just have to check the Erasmus Mundus catalog. Thank you so much. So what is your perception on science? Do you believe that science and research is capable in turning the current world challenges around?
So I think that's a quite important question. Science is, to me, is a very important tool, a very important approach to reality, and in particular, studying biodiversity is very important because we are living in an epoch of unprecedented decline in biodiversity. You know, the Anthropocene is characterized by many dramatic processes, but biodiversity collapse and biodiversity loss is a key one. And research can be the way, can be the window to understand what's happening and to provide recommendations and ways to improve and decrease the loss of biodiversity. But at the same time, science alone cannot do much. Science needs to liaise with stakeholders, with politicians, with policymakers, to ensure that what we get from research is actually followed up. And so we need more and more interaction and synergy between scientists, policymakers, and politicians to really make a big change. And at the same time, it's important that we disseminate our results to the wider public, because obviously we need a change across societies. So what we find with our research would not be useful in the current epoch of biodiversity crisis if it's not used all the way across the various levels, from the public to the politicians.
Oh, great. Thank you. I want to believe that you've conducted research for a number of years. And if you have, what would you say is the major challenge in modern research as compared to the years behind?
Yeah, sure. I've been doing research actually in tropical habit environments since 2002. So now it's more than 20 years.
Wow.
I began working in Tanzania in a biodiversity hotspot. It's called the Eastern Afro-Montane and the Eastern Arc Mountains, Eastern Africa and South Central Tanzania. And the research has changed a lot in these more than 2 decades. I think the main change I've seen are partially in the methods. We have more powerful methods nowadays to analyze the data, to collect the data. We use sensors, remote sensors like camera traps or climate sensors. Faster way to analyze the data, manage the data and analyze the data. But I think a big change has been in the progressive sharing of data across the planet and across the tropics in particular. Sharing data from different areas in a consistent way so that we can identify patterns at the scale required to address them, which is also a global scale. When you think of climate change and need for expansion of protected areas and things like that, these are global drivers. They need to be translated into local contexts, but we need global data as well as fine-scale data to address this issue. And what has really changed is that nowadays a lot of scientists are merging into networks in a way that we have data from various scales, and that's very important.
Great. But what of, in as much as we want large-scale data, then have enough research across continents to be able to have a conclusive happening. What of funding? Because I know in developing countries, less attention is paid to research in most cases. What would you say is the main problem when it comes to funding?
It is a big problem, the disparity of data from the temperate countries from the north to the south. So the tropics live in a paradox in a way for biodiversity, because it's by far the richest biome on Earth, the tropical forest, which is the biome I know the most. But it's the one with most species suffering the most threats. There's the highest number of threatened species in the tropics. But we don't have enough data, we don't have enough consistent data especially for addressing the problems at the scale required. Many studies are showing that, global studies, for example, on productivity, on species richness, on trends, on mammals, for example. They are showing that we have lots of data from the north and few points, scattered points from the tropics. Still, if the data are consistently collected, which is what we're trying to do, that can make a change. We have networks of 40, 50 areas in the field I work on that can really help revealing trends.
Oh, okay. You just mentioned the field you work on, so I guess I'll carry the question to what are you working on currently, the field you are working on currently.
Yeah, so my focal area has been the Eastern Arc Mountains and Tanzania. Some areas in Tanzania, in particular, in tropical forest, I've been working mainly on mammals, forest mammals that we study in different ways, from transits, so from counting these animals, from trails to using camera traps, remote sensors. We have become experts, especially on the use of camera traps at various levels. And we study the ecology of species and communities, because camera traps are able to detect single species but also entire communities. And we study the responses of this community to changes, especially to anthropogenic changes. So we have been studying, for example, how protection impact the status of the species. Okay. So what does it change when you move from a national park to a forest which is not well protected? We have also studied how anthropogenic presence and impact outside protected areas have an impact inside protected areas. Now we have global trends and policies and targets of expanding the network of protected areas, the so-called 30 by 30. Okay. But this is not possible if we don't understand the dynamics of how biodiversity is impacted by anthropogenic changes in the landscape, because we don't have enough room for all these new protected areas. So we need to be able to understand what's happening when you make a new park, which area is more suitable to that. So this is some of the topics that I study. We have been working at different scale, from focal area and long-term monitoring to broad-scale assessments.
Okay. So, with all that you've studied in the past years, in a simple understanding, what would you tell us has been the outcome of most of your research works?
So I think in general one key results I would say goes in terms of approach. So we found that it's important to know an area very well to be effective. Therefore, I like long-term studies, long-term monitoring, because only when you know a system very well, because you have been there for a few years, you study trends, you can really understand the dynamics and understand, find patterns in your data. That's one thing. On the other hand, you can also build the necessary local network of stakeholders that can take on the recommendations from your work and therefore you can be more effective in conservation. So I think that's something that has to do with approach. This is an important approach. I mean, you don't want to go do a quick study and leave. You want to be effective, and therefore you need to make sure that you have an impact in the area by a longer term presence. In terms of results, unfortunately, we are finding sometimes dramatic results from trends in global biodiversity, especially looking at mammals, for example. We find that anthropogenic disturbance is having an impact. It's having an impact on the number of species. There is less species in areas which are more surrounded by more people. We find an impact of deforestation, fragmentation of forests, infrastructure. And this is not only coming from global assessments, which sometimes mix data of different sources, but this also comes from our field data, from our ground-based site-specific measurements. So my emphasis is in revealing patterns that come from ground data and from consistent data, not from literature review or mixing up studies. So now we are capable to use sensors like camera traps that can give us a lot of information, and we are finding way more robust and I would say reliable patterns than it used to be.
In all these studies, how has the scientists or the researchers you work with, how collaborative have they been? Has it always been we do the work, we publish the paper, everyone goes his way, or you still follow up with the findings, with the decision makers, with the people, the community, people who really need such results and understand? Or in all these sense, what have you been doing? Do you follow up or is this?
Yeah, so this goes back to what I was saying before, that it's important to know an area and be present in an area for a long time to be really effective. And this is exactly the point. Because if you just collect some data, okay, your data may be used for network analysis, they may be used for fancy papers, but that's it. If you want to have an impact in conservation, and I think as biodiversity scientists we should do applied research, then it's important to build a network of local partners. This means local government, often local NGOs, protected areas. Try to help them even with raising funding. For example, we have been helping with with connecting local NGOs with donors to improve the protection of some parks. Obviously, it's not us as scientists that can go there in a foreign country and do practical conservation. Conservation should be done by local people, by the local NGOs. But we can have a big role, way bigger than usually we do, in facilitating applied conservation. So through our long-term research site, which is in the Udzungwa Mountains, it's a hotspot of biodiversity, we are trying to do that, and we have been quite effective in facilitating conservation in the area.
Oh, great. I'm so happy to hear that it doesn't end there and it's really helping the community. Aside the community, where do you find most of your works? Where do you publish them? Where can we trace it? People who may want to reference most of your documents so far.
Oh well, we have published quite a number of papers in two models, I would say. on one side, specific papers for the work that we do in different areas. I mean, I was talking of Tanzania, but we also work in other areas. On the other hand, we are always trying to join networks for global or regional scale papers that usually get to high impact journals. The best way is to go into ResearchGate. I think if you go into ResearchGate and search for my name, you find a full array of papers.
Great. In the same field, what are the emerging areas young scientists who are coming up? Where do you think they should focus? Areas around conservation, or in biology, or in your field? Where you think?
Well, I think because we do have a big crisis in biodiversity, and quite often there is more emphasis on climate change, or on other global scale processes. Less and less people maybe is focusing on actual biodiversity. Okay, so there is an emphasis on carbon, for example, and the like. I think it's important to work on biodiversity. So I encourage students to develop strong skills, strong scientific skills, because you do need that. The world is competitive, the systems are complex, so you need to have strong skills to work in science, and also don't lose touch to the ground. I mean, try to do studies that can arrive at applied conservation recommendations, and maybe even follow up. I mean, a lot of Tropimundo students come from tropical countries, from habitat countries, so they are in the best position to work upon the results. I mean, they represent the new generation of scientists for their own country, and I'm seeing that in Tanzania, where we have worked with lots of young guys. We have had them studying. They are really making a change. So strong scientific skills, but don't lose connection to the ground and to real biodiversity.
Okay, so thank you. Finally, as we leave, what will be your final words to the scientific community? You've already made a lot of recommendations to young scientists, but in general, on science, on society, on politics, science in all these spheres, what will be your
I mean, I think science needs to be more and more relevant to society, to the reality, to the global issues. You know, we are really living in an epoch of crisis, environmental crisis, and science has to be relevant, has to be quick and relevant to mitigating the crisis. We don't have time to, especially in our field. I mean, obviously there can be theoretical science, but in our field, science has to be applied and has to address outstanding questions. Otherwise, we won't have anything else to study, because everything is going down.
All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was fun.
I'm very grateful. I hope that all the information shared today will be spread across, and the young scientists will take that right to.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me.
Gracias.